Welcome to another Decoding Digital Media webinar by Media Impact International, MII, in partnership with Faith Tech. Thank you so much for being here. Today, we are talking about a very important topic: social media engagements. As you all know, social media is getting crowded day by day. The noise is becoming noisier, and the content overload and content shock and the content mountain that is around us, that's only becoming bigger and bigger each day, is overwhelming us. And not just us, but especially our audience as media ministries, because of which there is a constant decline of social media engagement across board. So if you've been wondering what's happening with social media engagement, why is the engagement rate so low on some of your campaigns, then definitely you're going to find this workshop insightful. We are going to discuss the ways in which you can breathe new life into your social media engagement strategy. And I can't wait to get started. But let me introduce our guests for today. Our first guest is Nick Runyon, who has held multiple C-level titles in both industry and ministry organizations, focused on leveraging technology to create human connections. Most recently, he led a organization called PFL, a 300-person marketing technology software company, through a successful turnaround as CEO by navigating multiple funding rounds and hiring a new executive team to create a company that delivers customer engagement for some of the largest brands in the world, like Salesforce, Zoom, Microsoft, etc. Nick is a long-time MII partner and has spoken on faith-based technology at events hosted by Google, Facebook, and others. He has trained over 100 ministries in improving evangelism efforts through the use of digital media and follow-up platforms. Our next guest is Dr. Frank Preston. Frank earned his PhD from the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Wisconsin. His expertise aids in understanding media and church planting movements across various background peoples. And Dr. Preston has conducted many international research projects and participates in several think tanks on media in missions for unreached peoples. He is active in several media strategies and consults with major media organizations on media strategies. He's both a theorist and a practitioner in media in terms of church planting. Preston's research findings have been published in the Journal of Development Communication, Evangelical Missions Quarterly, Oxford Analytica, Seedbed, and chapters in 6 scholarly books. We are so blessed to have such a scholar among us and really look forward to learning from him. After we talk to our two special guests, we are going to have a bonus segment where you will hear from Basma Hannah from our Egypt office. Basma is a MII follow-up manager and a follow-up trainer, and she manages the discipleship department of MII, Media Impact International. And she has a bachelor degree in tourism and hotel management, and she graduated from theological school in Alexandria, Egypt in 2014, and she also studied counseling in the University of Nations in Australia. And she has been in missions with YWAM for 15 years, leading discipleship training school, DTS, for 6 years in England. And she's passionate. You will hear from her and you will see her passion for this work that she does. Loves missions and traveling, and such a amazing, energetic person who loves what God does through this ministry. With all those years of experience and expertise, our guests are about to share with you a lot of information. So get ready. And I want to remind you that you can ask your questions anytime during the event, and we have an expert who will answer your questions even as you ask right through the session live. So we will take questions and we will answer those questions live throughout the session. And of course, if we have a lot of questions, we will also take some of them towards the end of the session as well. So throughout the session and at the end of the session, we will be taking questions. So please leave your questions using the Q&A tab. Nick and Frank, welcome to the show. Welcome on behalf of MII and the entire team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
currently, what is the thing that excites you the most about what you're doing, and what's in your heart for social media engagement, the topic that we're discussing right now, and for the kingdom? Just a word from you before we get started.
Oh, I think I'm most excited about well, conversations like this, first of all. So let me just say again, thank you for asking me to join. I'm happy to be here today. And throughout, my career over the last almost 20 years now, like done a lot of work in social media engagement and digital evangelism, and things change in this space. I've often told teams it's not what it's how quickly you can learn and apply and measure those results. And so what excites me most right now, Nachi, is just what I'm seeing across. I'm in a position where I've got an opportunity to work with a number of different teams and ministries, and what I see happening in the landscape of social media and digital ministry today is really remarkable. I think that some of the tools are changing quickly, and I think that people are figuring out new and exciting ways to apply those to really add value and connect with people in a meaningful way. So it's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. What an exciting time to be alive. And Frank, we met a couple of years ago, and you've done some incredible work in different parts of the world, and we met in India. So tell us a little bit about what's happening right now. I know you always have great, exciting things happening in your work. So tell us a little bit, and also give our viewers a little bit of your background and what you're excited about with respect to today's topic.
Thank you. Thank you very much for letting me be part of this group. It's a fun thing. So thank you very much. Um, what I'm excited about is the number of field initiatives who have previous to involving a media strategy really was having very little long-term fruit. And now we're seeing in multiple locations, in 2 locations, that we're moving to a movement level, which is basically defined as 4 streams, 4 generations of churches, and over 1,000 baptized believers coming in within 2 years of the media strategy. And we'll talk about that a little later on. But also many other places where people have found it just a difficult field, have found this to be a very open, a wide door opening for the gospel, as Paul talks about in epistles. So I'm excited about using media in church planting strategy.
Very excited about that. So let me dive right in, and let's get started. So just from a quick introduction perspective, across board, if you're listening to me, I don't have to tell you that engagements are dropping. So what all of us are seeing is a steady decline in engagement rates. Let me give you a few statistics here just to show you how this engagement rate is steadily declining across board. So this is a latest statistics, 2023 statistics from this company called Rival IQ, which I regularly look for the last couple of years. They've done a good job covering various industries and so on. So this engagement rate metric, let me point out a few interesting things to you. So just look at this graph, right? We've got Instagram here, we've got Facebook and Twitter, just as an example. So look at the way this graph goes down. 2019 engagement rate, 20, 21, 22, steady drop. Look at that. And the same thing with Facebook, same thing with Twitter. So basically what we're saying is across board. So you are not alone. Your ministry is not alone. There is a steady decrease in engagement rate. So what we're going to talk about today is practical tips. I'm going to share with you 3 practical tips right now to increase your engagement in the top or the beginning of your campaigns, the beginning of your activity, the top of the funnel, as we call it. So when you start engaging with people on social media, what can you do? 3 things I'm going to share with you. But I also want to tell you this decline in engagement rate has got nothing to do with the number of posts. I mean, if that is one thing you're thinking about, well, look at this. Instagram weekly post over time, it's increased from 4.3 to 4.6 in 4 years. And Facebook is also tried increasing and decreasing. And Twitter has been increasing, decreasing. Well, guess what? Nothing worked. Right? Look at this. I mean, in 2021, everybody had huge increase in the number of posts. But as you can see, in 2021, the engagement didn't go up, right? So it's got nothing to do with the number of posts. So if at all you're thinking I should post more, or I should talk more to my audience, or have flood my audience with content, that is not the thing. As you can hear, you will hear from all the three of us. You will see that what it takes a little bit of tactics, it takes a little bit of strategic thinking, it takes a little bit of shift in your mindset to get that engagement rate up and running again. So let me give you three things that I think will move your needle when it comes to engagement rate. And these are practical stuff based on what we have done, based on the campaigns we've run at the top of the funnel, reaching audiences all over the world at any given point of time. We are running multiple campaigns in multiple languages as MII. As I told you in the introduction, that's our ministry, and that's what we do day in and day out. So based on all our experiences, I have put together 3 points. Let me run them very quickly through you. First is the topic of engagement. So I go from number 3. So I'll go from 3, 2, and 1. So the number 3 is the topic. So one of the things you can think about if you want to increase your engagement on social media is, what are you talking about? See, there are a million things you can talk about as a ministry, right? So you need to pay attention to the kind of topic. So just to back it up with statistics, I'll show you on Instagram, for example. So this is the same research, but in the non-profit niche, right? So this research they conduct in different industries, different niches, and niche, or however you say it. So this is for non-profit. And here in Instagram, you see that when non-profits focus on events, for example, look at this, back to school, winter. This is more in the Western world, but we can take a lot of clues for any part of the world. So basically, when, for example, on Instagram, just give you an example so you can think of it with respect to the channel that you use, the kind of context that you are in, the culture that you are in, and so on. So one thing that seems to work is events. Event-based topics seems to increase engagement. And then there are some issues. For example, World Mental Health Day was one of the top engaging topics. Back to school was one of the top one, right? The contextual time-based topics are also doing really well. So what I'm trying to say is focus on the kind of topic that you're dealing with when it comes to social media. For example, on Twitter, Election Day, obviously, and then even Pride, LGBTQ, those kind of controversial topics, and health, those type of things. Again, back to school is doing well. And TikTok, well, for your information, TikTok, look at the engagement. I mean, TikTok is right now the most engaging channel in the world. They just beat engagement of any channel outright. So the engagement rate is incredible. Can't even compare with any other channel. But the interesting thing is, as you all know, it's very top of the funnel reach kind of a channel. So obviously comedy is 91% right there on TikTok. And then the rest of it, of course, hashtag dance. So if any of you listening to me, you're good in dancing, well, good for you, because you're going to get a lot of engagement as a media ministry. But I know that not many of us are going to dance. So apart from dancing, some of the tips for TikTok are more like, again, events based, art based. So you can focus on some of the interests of your audience. See, when you're trying to reach audience at the top of the funnel to bring them at the bottom, what Frank is going to talk about, or Nick is going to talk about, as you move them to the journey, the point is engagement has to be the step that they take to make them go towards the next step, right? This is the top of the funnel engagement is absolutely crucial, because this is the first step in their entire journey. If they don't take the step, they're not going to go to your additional resources. They're not going to have a face-to-face conversation. None of that is going to happen if your top of the funnel engagement is not convincing. So that is why focusing on strategies like this is absolutely crucial, because you need to get people engaged at that stage. So let me go to number 2, the type of engagement topics that the type of content that you use for engagement. I'm sorry. So apart from the topic, you need to focus on type of content, because interestingly, there seems to be some types of content that works on some channels. So as a ministry, you need to think through, well, if you're using Instagram, what is the type of content that you're going to use? Here in this graph, you will see 2022, the top content that outperformed any of that is carousels. Carousels are those swipeable images, and that is the type of content that has worked on Instagram. for example. Photos have also done very well. And of course, Reels, as Instagram says, is one of the top types of content. I guess in 2023, Reels will actually outperform carousels. That's just the way things are going. So think about carousels and Reels when it comes to Instagram. So it's not just the topic, but it's also the type of content. But on Facebook, interestingly, photo outperforms every other type of content. Photo, just individual photos. So that's because of the type of channel that Facebook is. And also on Twitter, interestingly, videos seem to be doing well, right? It was not the case earlier, but now slowly Twitter engagement with videos are starting to go up. So basically, just some examples for helping you think through the type of content that you're going to focus in 2023 as you think of increasing your engagement rate. So point number one, focus on the topic. Point number two, focus on the type of content so that your engagement will go up. But the final thing that I want to share with you, and this is the ultimate tool for increasing your engagement. And this has got nothing to do with the type of channel. It's got nothing to do with the topic. It's got nothing to do with your content or anything. It's got to do with your community, right? See, one thing that you and me are blessed with being in the faith-based space is we have a captive audience. Many of my social media friends, they come to me and they tell me, oh, Nachi, with churches and ministries, you guys have a captive audience. Even if you have a 10-member church, you've got 10 people to start with. Guess what? When a business or other commercial organization start, they don't have the 10 people. They have to earn every single person. But for us as a church or ministry, we have something to start with. So it's a 50-member church, 100-member church, small media ministry, whatever it is, you got an existing community already in operation, right? So they are already with you. You need to use them for engagement. Because guess what? Along with your existing community, there is something called an extended community. This is the beauty of social media. When I click on your image, guess who all sees it? All my friends, all my family. So Facebook or Instagram, make sure that my extended community has a visibility to the content that I am interested in. So naturally, what they do is they help your content be propagated to my extended audience. So your job, what am I trying to say? What am I trying to say is this. I'm trying to tell you, use the power of the existing audience that you already have, whether it is church members or your donors in your nonprofit or people who support your media ministry. Even if there are a handful of people, let's say you only have 50 people, right? How many people are each of those 50 connected to minimum on social media? A minimum 100 is a very small number, right? But if they are going to be 100, you have the capacity to reach 50,000 audience for every post. That's a good engagement. So, and if you get your audience, so what I'm trying to say is, if you're a church or a ministry or a nonprofit, get your existing audience to engage with your post. If you're a church, tell your church members, hey, every time we go live, I would love for you to click there, like, comment, just engage, share your thought. Because when they do that, then the social network will recognize that as a good content and show it to the extended community. This is a very old, probably 10-year-old strategy when it comes to social media success. But over the years, we've all been so used to social media that we forget the basics. So, and this is a basic that works really well for the faith-based community. So at the top of the funnel, I've got 3 things that I've shared with you, right? Focus on the topic that works for your audience, that increases engagement. Focus on the type of content that could increase your engagement. And finally, focus on your community that could help you increase your engagement. Well, that's all I had for you today. Before we move forward, just want to quickly remind you to use the Q&A tab to ask your questions. So we have an expert who will answer your questions through the event. Even as the event is going on, in the chat section, you will receive answers to your question as you ask them. So please use the Q&A section. If at all during this session, if our expert is not able to get to your questions or not able to answer your questions, we will take them and we will discuss them at the end of the session as well. But continue to ask questions because we have an expert who is live and is answering questions as you ask them. Thank you so much. Use the Q&A section. Great. Now let's get to our experts and let's just quickly chat about what they think about these topics. So first, to start with you, Frank, what are your thoughts on these 3 things at the top of the funnel? What do you think?
what thoughts I came to was, so first of all, was in John 6, fishes and loaves. Jesus gave fishes and loaves, and they had 15,000 people wanted to become followers of Jesus in one day. Then all of a sudden, he began talking about commitment, and he dropped it down to 12 people. So, but those 12 people became game changers. So sometimes you can get more population, but less quality of outcomes. And then and that's where you end up got to being clear. What is my audience? Who's my audience? What do I want them to do? And then what is the context when my audience consumes the message? So being clear there. John 17, Paul had a very slow engagement, very minor engagement within the synagogue, but the types of people who came out of that became the ones who became world changers. So be attentive to the number of engagements, but also who is your audience? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want them to do? And then focus heavily on that, and then pull in even maybe lower numbers, smaller numbers, but higher quality numbers.
Golden, absolutely golden. Thank you so much, Frank. Nick, any thoughts on the top of the funnel engagement strategies?
I was laughing when Frank, you were talking about the loaves and fishes, and then the difference between feeding people and then Jesus preaching about commitment, because it's such a great example to bring into the conversation there. I agree completely. The numbers that you were putting up there, Nachi, I think are very interesting, but some in the audience might be looking at those engagement numbers and saying, well, they're all less than 2%. So those are relative on the bar graphs, but even the best performing one was less than 2% of the audience. So that's a really a challenging thing in order to start from such a small number of engagement, and then see how do we bring people through to life change. And I imagine many in the audience that are watching this are in a ministry context where they're trying to really bring people through to a point where they're either building a relationship with the Lord for the first time, or furthering an existing one. But engagement remains a challenge, and I think that some of these trends that you're displaying are recent examples of what's working well. But that context is incredibly important, like you mentioned, because I think that that's the lens with which people view our social media and the content that we're putting out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and also our audience, which are spread out in different regions. We've got people from MENA region, we've got from Asia, we've got from the US and UK and various places. So I think what Nick mentioned there is very important, the word context. So it's important for us to be culturally sensitive, contextually relevant, and also be focused on those things when we talk about topics and types and all the three things that I mentioned. That's awesome. So let's dive into the second part of this webinar, where I'm going to ask Nick to jump in and talk to us a little bit about the next step after people engage with us initially at the top of the funnel and they say hello to us. What can we do to further that engagement, even if it's a small number, like Frank mentioned, even if it's a handful of people? What can we do? And I know Nick has extensive experience across the world with engaging communities and so on. So give us some light. Over to you, Nick. Looking forward to hearing you.
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's a constant, this ministry, this effort that we're all engaged in is a constant process of kind of observing what's happening, making some decisions, learning from those results, and then trying to apply what we've learned for the next iteration. But one of the things that's stayed the same throughout, the 10 or 15 years that we've been working on this, and a lot of that's been with MII and a number of ministries that I imagine might be watching today, is that we see that a couple of things. Their reach is not the problem. Engagement remains the problem, as you're talking about. And so, the question really is, Nachi, as you teed it up, how do we get people to move from one step to the next? Having been involved with ministries that have reached, hundreds of millions, I was with Global Media Outreach for a while, and Global Media Outreach just a couple of years ago crossed the 2 billion gospel presentation number, which is incredible. I mean, that's an incredible number. And I was involved with them and really did a lot of work to make sure that we're talking about, like, there's a depth of view. These aren't just ads that are being popped out there. Some of those numbers would boggle your mind. Like, that's, the hundreds of billions of ad impressions, which sounds ridiculous, but is really, I think, not a hard thing to achieve. But what I've always really kind of wrestled with and therefore tended to focus on is that we see, really, of whatever reach number we have across a number of different ministries, what's often the case is that we see 1% of 1% actually get connected into some kind of local faith community or long-term discipleship relationship, whether that's initially virtual or whether it goes into a face-to-face conversation at one point. So 1% of 1%, we might say, is not very good. So no matter what the massive big number is, 1% of 1% is seems like a lot of opportunity loss. But as I've thought through this, I think that what we need to understand is, like, why isn't there more? But also, is that okay? So let me start with that first. That question first. Like, is that okay? 1% of 1% might be okay, because I think what's happening here is that something we can't ignore is that the Holy Spirit is deeply involved in this effort. And if people are taking a step forward to engage, there's something else happening in their lives. And so 1% of 1% might be an appropriate number. However, I think that as marketers, as digital ministry leaders, we want to think about how can we maximize, or how can we optimize, how can we reach more people? And it really becomes a matter of breaking down that audience into different segments, understanding what people are looking for and why. And let me give you an example. So recently, I was leading up until earlier this week. I was leading a software company here in the U.S. 300 employees. We built marketing technology software that integrates all of these digital intent signals, and we use those intent signals in order to create like physical mail or welcome kits. We did a lot of event type of stuff. It was, I think, a fascinating business and a great product. And we were selling to companies like Salesforce and Google and some of the largest companies in the world. And the reason why it was effective is because we could look at the digital intent signals. We could look at what an audience or a prospect or customer was saying, what they were clicking on a customer's website. Say somebody's looking at a bank website, and they click on one of the links that talks about opening a savings account. Well, we would take that digital signal, and then we would send mail and some type of physical offering on behalf of the bank saying, here's how you can easily open a bank account. What are we doing there? What we're doing is we're recognizing the interest that somebody has and is demonstrating through their activity. And then we're engaging them in a different channel in order to really kind of break through the noise and bring them into, in the case of a bank, like a sales process. Now, of course, we're not selling anything here in a ministry context, but that same type of opportunity is available. If we can listen and we can observe what people are engaging with. So even though the engagement rates might be low, Nachi, I think you gave some great insight there. You had some great topics that you're talking about with social media. You can see that somebody is engaging with, something like the election. I remember the election from Twitter. Well, like, what does an election have to do with, a faith journey or a spiritual decision? There's a lot of issues around an election that I think the maybe the intelligent, or aware minister might look at. Well, what's really at the root of this? It's probably something with power. It's probably something with security. It's something like, what's the future mean for me? Like, who gets elected really impacts my day-to-day life. And so we can build content to speak to that. Now, one of the things I want to highlight with that example that I just gave with either the bank or election is that there's 10,000 marketing messages that are received every day digitally. All of us are bombarded. So there's a lot of noise. One of the reasons why engagement rates are so low is because it's noisy. In that business that I mentioned that I was leading, the reason why we were using physical mail was because it interrupts somebody's day. Now, I think it's not reasonable for all of us to say, like, let's take a social media audience and then mail them something, and deliver a physical product. I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think it's realistic. But the takeaway there is that can we engage people in a way that's kind of unexpected and in a way that takes their context and communicates immediately that what we have to share is both meaningful, valuable, and important for them. People view any message, marketing, ministry, or otherwise, through their own lens. They see and they hear in their own context. I'll give you an example of that. So again, back to this company that I ran. I mentioned that I recently resigned my role as CEO and going in a different direction and starting something new, which we're very excited about. But as I was announcing to my company, again, 300 employees, I got a lot of questions. And all of these questions had something to do with one big question that people were really asking. And that was, what's wrong? They said, our CEO is leaving. Where are you going? Like, what job are you going to? Why are you leaving? And it was all of these things. And people weren't really asking like, about me, like what job am I going to next? Why am I excited about it? What they're really asking is there something wrong with this company where I need to make a change myself? Like, do I need to leave if the CEO is leaving? And I was explaining this to a friend, and I think this is what we deal with in ministry context as well. We can say, to Frank's example, we can talk about commitment. We can talk about an election around security and things like that. We have to understand that people are going to hear it through their own filters. And so a proper understanding of what those filters are is going to allow us to drive people into steps that, we think are appropriate and able to help them more and get them to truly engage. So just, I think to sum up here, what are we really talking about? We're talking about reach is not the problem. Massive reach is available to all of us. Engagement is the problem, as you pointed out, Nachi. And to get people to truly engage with our message and our teams, we have to approach them with a message that is speaking to the context in which they find themselves. We have to understand what is it that they're concerned about, and then how can I meet them there? What opportunities are they looking to take advantage of? How can I meet them there? And then is there a bridge into a gospel conversation? So just to wrap up this idea, really, as we're talking about the mid-funnel, I had this conversation with a church recently. I said, it's very rare that somebody is going to see your social media, decide to go to church, show up at 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning, walk down the aisle, make a profession of faith, and then get into whatever discipleship program that you've already established for them. Like, the world just doesn't work that way. That's probably less than 1% of 1% of people would follow that path. So the context is, if your message is resonating with them, say it's something about, like peace in a world that's in turmoil. Maybe that's the message that you're going with. What people are really, when we recognize that what people really want is they want to know the source of peace. They want to be guided. And I think that guiding happens in the context of relationship. How can we then create paths and opportunities for people to engage personally in order to discuss whatever it is that they're first kind of resonating with in our gospel message, to come into a deeper relationship with, whether it's follow-up teams, church planning teams, face-to-face or digital. I think that's a key element there, is to increase engagement. We have to recognize the context and bring them into those opportunities that speak to people where they are today.
Before we move on, a very quick reminder for you to use the Q&A tab to ask your questions anytime during the event, and we have an expert who is live, and you will get answers to your questions even as you ask them in the chat section. So even as the event is moving on, you will be able to see the answers to your questions in the chat section. If we do have lots of questions and we are not able to get to them, we will deal with them towards the end of the session, also when we have a longer dedicated Q&A. But throughout this event, we have an expert answering your questions live. So please use the Q&A tab to ask your questions. Leaders that are listening to me, I want to challenge you. Just go back a few months, pick up all the metrics from your social media campaigns, and just pick the winners, the big engaging campaigns. You will see some of what Nick just mentioned. You will probably see that you bridged a gap there. You'll probably see that that was an issue that you listened to them properly and you engaged. Something just triggers their heart. So I think that there's just a lot of gold packed in there. Thank you so much, Nick. Frank, I want to pick your thoughts on some of the things that Nick mentioned. Any wisdom, any insights?
Yeah, I love Nick's observation about 2%. One of the things that we focus heavily on is one main principle to our media strategies is that 2.5% of any population is open for religious change at any time. So, and that number we've been watching that number for years, and that tends to be stable. And it has to do with this research on anomalies. And so church planting does not occur from the center and out. It actually occurs from the anomalies out and then move itself toward the end. And so once we identify our 2.5%, in other words, they know they exist, then our top of the funnel and the mid funnel is actually identifying those populations. Again, go back to our fishes and loaves. Yeah, it could work out quite well, get a lot of engagement, but do we actually have anybody who meets our long-term goal, which is to make an impact on the kingdom of God? Are they good people who become followers of Christ? Are they going to become disciples of Christ? Are they going to become leaders in our fellowships? So it could be that we may have to adopt an Acts 17 strategies, go in there and looking for smaller numbers, but they're going to be super high quality. Yeah, it is a problem.
Frank, can you talk a little bit more about that? The difference between inside out and outside in? Just expand on that a little bit.
Inside out is that we may maybe a little bit. This is maybe a little different than what Nachi was saying. Is that you find your existing population and you get them to extend out to their outside populations, and those people tend to be of the same homogeneity. They actually know each other. They're from the same religious background, and you may be able to get those people to be involved in your fellowship or your growth, but they're actually already one. They are already believers, or they're actually close to being believers. If we're going to extend the kingdom of God, we have to go to territories where there are no believers. So that's where the anomalies lie. That's the outside fringes of population, and that moves toward the center. So one of the things that some of our research, some of our strategies is looking for those anomalies. Where are they at? Where's the Samaritan woman? Where's Nicodemus? Where's the people in Acts 17, the God-fearing Greeks? How do we end up reaching those populations? Because those are the ones who are going to be where the growth of the kingdom of God will come into.
Yeah, and this is where that is excellent, and really I think clarifies what I was trying to say is I mean, I've done this for a while now, and I'm wondering is 1% of 1% from the top level reach. If you reach 100,000 people, 1% of 1% will really engage. And is it that we are finding that person of peace, who then we bring them into a discipleship relationship, and then the kingdom multiplies through them? Or is it that we should try to maximize, I want 20% of, 100,000 people to come all the way through? I wonder if that's real. I don't think that's realistic, I guess, is what the position that I'm taking today, is that if you were to reach 100,000 people with a social media message, or you see that much engagement, I don't think we should expect to see, 20, 30, 40% of those people engage in a meaningful long-term discipleship relationship. And that might be okay. I think what you're going to come away with are the few who are really core and then can multiply the kingdom over the long term through those people.
Yeah. Nick, I have a question for you. So, since you've been on, leadership teams of large organizations, even the last one you mentioned about 300 people and so on. So, how, when you think of this 1% of the 1%, and we're talking about small numbers here, how do you set goals, targets? And especially if you're thinking big, which we are all used to in the ministry world, we want to reach the entire world, with the Great Commission. How do you set engagement targets? Do you just say it's okay to have smaller numbers, or do you set smaller numbers and then at the top of the funnel go for even like proportionally bigger number, which you sort of mentioned in a minute ago? How did you do it as a leader? What was your experience? And even in a commercial context, how did you approach this problem, this issue of numbers?
What I think what you first have to do is to bring your team, in a ministry context, your donors, your supporters, your ministry partners, you have to bring them to a point to where they're comfortable with ambiguity. We have to be comfortable with knowing that we don't really know everything today, because these environments are shifting so quickly. The tools that we had yesterday that allowed me to target very small number of people on Facebook or through Facebook groups, they don't exist anymore. As a result, the ad costs are incredibly high. Like the conversion costs, the money that I'm spending on ads in order to get people into, like a face-to-face conversation, that number has grown exponentially. And it'll change again tomorrow, like whatever's working today. So first of all, you have to bring your team into a place of being very comfortable, just kind of exploring and being very objective. And so even my comment about like 1% of 1% might be okay. Like I've said the opposite in the past, and so your question's a good one. Well, then I might state it a different way. Like, does that mean we just settle for less? I don't think so. I think what that means is I'm going to try to explore ways to find the anomalies that Frank's talking about. And I'll go back to the business example, by the way. At my company, we really, and it's been very successful for us. We're selling into large Fortune, 100 type of companies, big enterprises, and we're selling software. We've used something called an account-based marketing strategy. So rather than, just kind of blasting at the awareness phase and then seeing who, maybe takes a call to action and, this traditional funnel, what we used in our company was an account-based model. So that's more like, I want to sell to Salesforce. Who inside of Salesforce do I need to connect with? Map out that organization, understand which departments have buying authority, who owns the budget, who's going to sign the check. Now, in a ministry context, that might look like, I want to reach this population or this people group that's far from God. Who holds what's the power structure look like? In some of these like small people groups, is there like a chief in a village? Is there a leader that we know that if we win that person, that others will follow? Now that's easier to conceive like in a traditional like face-to-face missionary context, but I think that some of those ideas can be deployed digitally as well. And so it's not necessarily Najee settling for lower numbers.
Okay.
It's creating a strategy that is more effective, and then we think about how do I scale it, and that scaling is really where the I think the maximized impact comes in.
Awesome. Yeah, because I knew that, that's probably one of the things that's running in the heads of the leaders that are listening to us. So thank you for clarifying that. That is a great approach. I want to dig a little bit more on that towards the end, but now I want to go into Frank's material, and I want to hear some of his things, especially a nice transition since you talked about people groups. Among all of us, I think Frank has